My name is Nancy Whitaker. I'm 59 years old. At 8:07 on a Saturday morning in September, I opened my garage door to look for my late husband's socket wrench and found the pegboard wall empty. Not messy, not rearranged, empty. The outline of his tools still hung there in dust, pale shadows where the hammer had rested for 26 years. 2 clean vertical stripes where the level had been. A faded rectangle where his red metal toolbox had sat on the workbench. Hooks tilted slightly upward with nothing on them, like hands asking where everything had gone. For a few seconds, I just stood there in my slippers, holding a chipped coffee mug, listening to the garage door motor hum above me. The air smelled like cardboard, sawdust, lawn fertilizer, and the faint motor oil scent that had somehow survived 3 years after my husband died. Sunlight came in through the small garage windows and landed across the concrete floor where his rolling tool chest used to be. Used to be. That was the phrase my mind would not accept. My husband, Robert Whitaker, had been gone for 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. Lung cancer took him slowly enough to be cruel and fast enough to leave half-finished projects behind. His tools were not just tools. They were his handwriting in metal. They were every porch rail he repaired, every bike he fixed for our son, every birdhouse he built for me, every neighbor's lawnmower he coaxed back to life for the price of a cup of coffee. And they were gone. The hammer with the dark tape around the handle. The socket set his father gave him when he turned 18. The yellow-handled screwdrivers arranged by size, because Robert said chaos was for people who owned only one screwdriver. The red toolbox with his initials scratched into the lid, the old drill press in the corner, the small wooden box of carving tools he used to make Christmas ornaments for our grandchildren. Gone. I took one step forward and saw something written in black marker on a cardboard box near the freezer. Kyle plus Megan storage. Kyle was my son. Megan was his wife. They had asked to store a few things in my garage 6 weeks earlier, while they renovated their basement. A few things had become 12 boxes, 2 dining chairs, a stroller, a broken treadmill, 3 plastic bins of seasonal decor, and a pile of items Megan kept calling, quote, temporary overflow. I had said yes because mothers say yes before they ask themselves whether the yes is safe. I set my coffee on the workbench with both hands. Then I called Kyle. He answered on the 4th ring, voice groggy. Mom? Where are your father's tools? Silence. Not confusion, silence. That was my first answer. Then he said, what do you mean? I mean, I am standing in the garage and your father's tools are gone. Another pause. Megan cleaned up a little. Cleaned up. My hand tightened around the phone. Kyle, he sighed. Mom, don't get upset before we talk. That was the second answer. Do not get upset before we explain why your grief is inconvenient. I looked at the empty pegboard wall and felt something inside me go very still. Put Megan on the phone. She's sleeping. Wake her. Mom, wake her. There was muffled movement, a whisper. Then Megan's voice came through the speaker, annoyed before she had earned the right. Nancy? Where are Robert's tools? She exhaled loudly. Oh my God, is that what this is about? That. As if I had called about an old towel. As if my husband's tools had not just vanished from the room where his absence still breathed. Yes, Megan, that is what this is about. She said, I sold some of the old junk in the garage. Junk. 1 word. 5 letters. A whole marriage reduced to scrap in my daughter-in-law's mouth. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not tell her that Robert's hands had held those tools through 40 years of work, fatherhood, illness, and love. I did not remind her that she had asked to store her things in my garage, not conduct an estate sale from it. I just looked at the empty hooks, counted 7 seconds, and said, You sold my property? She laughed, short and sharp. Nancy, it was rusted tools. You weren't using any of it. We needed space, and honestly, that garage was becoming unsafe. Unsafe. My husband's memory had become a safety hazard. Kyle murmured something in the background. Megan snapped, No, I'm not doing this. Your mom needs to let go. Let go. That was when I hung up. What they didn't know was that one of the buyers had already messaged me. Not Megan, me. At 7:52 that morning, 15 minutes before I opened the garage, a man named Thomas Riley sent a message through Facebook with a photo of Robert's red toolbox in the back of his truck and wrote, "Mrs. Whitaker, I think I may have bought something that wasn't supposed to be sold. Your husband's name is engraved on several pieces. I found your address label inside the box. Please call me." What Megan did not know was that Thomas had kept the online listing, screenshots of her seller profile, pickup messages, payment confirmation, and a receipt she had written by hand because he paid cash. What Kyle did not know was that the socket set alone had been appraised by Robert's old union friend as vintage Snap-on, valuable enough to be insured if I wanted to keep it. And what neither of them understood was that calling something junk does not make it yours. It only tells everyone how little you knew before you stole it. This is that story. Before I tell you how my daughter-in-law learned that selling a widow's late husband's tools has consequences beyond garage space, tell me where you are watching or listening from, and what time it is there. I always wonder who hears stories like this while remembering the moment someone treated their memories like clutter. And if you connect with stories about women who were betrayed, underestimated, used, and quietly took their power back, like and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Some women do not fight over dust. Some women wait for the buyer to send the receipt. I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in a small beige house 3 blocks from the lake, where winter wind could cut through your coat like it had keys. My father worked at a machine shop. My mother worked nights at a bakery. We were practical people, not sentimental in the obvious way. We did not keep everything, but what we kept meant something. I met Robert Whitaker when I was 22, at a church rummage sale where he was repairing a folding table leg with a screwdriver he carried in his jacket pocket. I remember that because I thought, who brings tools to a rummage sale? Robert did. Robert brought tools everywhere. He was 25 then, broad-shouldered, quiet, with brown hair that curled at the back of his neck and kind eyes that looked directly at a problem instead of pretending it would fix itself. He worked as a maintenance mechanic at a paper mill, and he had hands that seemed permanently marked by work no matter how thoroughly he scrubbed them, grease in the creases. Small scars near the knuckles. A pale line across his thumb from a saw slip at 19. He asked if I needed help carrying a box of donated books to my car. I said, "Do you always rescue furniture and women in the same morning?" He smiled, "Only when both are leaning wrong." That was Robert. Not flashy. Useful in a way that felt like shelter. We married 2 years later in the basement hall of St. Matthew's Lutheran, because the upstairs sanctuary was being repaired after water damage. Robert helped fix the ceiling leak the week after the wedding, even though the pastor told him he was supposed to be on his honeymoon. He said, "Water doesn't care about romance." I loved him for that. Our life was not perfect, but it was solid. We bought a small ranch house with a 2-car garage and a fenced backyard. We had one son, Kyle, after 3 years of trying, and one miscarriage I still think about every February. Robert built the crib himself from oak, sanding each rail until it felt like silk. When Kyle was born, Robert stood beside my hospital bed, holding him like he had been handed a live star. The tools were part of our marriage from the beginning, not background. Part of it. The symbolic object in this story was Robert's red metal toolbox. It had belonged to his father, Walter Whitaker, who worked at the shipyard. Walter gave it to Robert when Robert turned 18, with 3 things inside: a socket wrench, a ball-peen hammer, and a note written on a piece of cardboard. Tools don't make a man useful. Care does. Robert kept that note taped inside the lid for 41 years. When we were newly married, the toolbox sat in the corner of our first apartment closet because we did not have a garage yet. When we bought the house, Robert carried it into the garage before he carried in the mattress. When Kyle learned to walk, he toddled into the garage and tried to lift a wrench bigger than his forearm. Robert laughed so hard he had to sit down. "Start him early," he said. Kyle grew up in that garage. That is another reason the betrayal hurt. He knew what those tools were. At 6, he held the flashlight while Robert fixed the dryer. At 8, he sorted screws into jars labeled wood, metal, mystery. At 10, he helped build a birdhouse for my birthday and painted it blue, because I liked blue. At 12, he learned to change a bike tire. At 16, he borrowed the socket, set to work on his first car, and lost the 10mm socket because apparently every boy must sacrifice one to the universe. Robert pretended to be stern, then bought 3 extras. After Kyle left for college, Robert still used the garage as his thinking place. Some men have offices. Some have boats. Robert had a workbench with a radio, a coffee can full of pencils, a vise mounted on the corner, and enough hardware and baby food jars to rebuild civilization after a modest disaster. When he got sick, the garage became painful. At first, he kept working through treatments, smaller tasks, sharpening blades, fixing a loose drawer, cleaning tools more often than using them. Then the chemo weakened him. Then the breathlessness came. Then he would stand in the garage doorway and look at the workbench like a man staring across water at a shore he could not reach. One afternoon, about 4 months before he died, I found him sitting on the stool beside the workbench with the red toolbox open. He had the note in his hand. "Tools don't make a man useful. Care does." I stood quietly behind him. He said, "Don't let Kyle throw these away." My throat tightened. He wouldn't. Robert looked at me. He knew our son better than I wanted him to. "Kyle won't mean harm," he said. "But people who don't know how something was used don't know what it's worth." I promised. After Robert died, I could not enter the garage for 3 months. The first time I did, I stood by the workbench and sobbed into one of his old flannel shirts until I had no breath left. Grief makes ordinary rooms dangerous. The garage was worse because every object still seemed to be waiting for him. The measuring tape pulled out halfway, the pencil behind his ear and a photo tacked near the shelf. The radio preset to the oldies station. The work gloves, stiff and curved like his hands had just slipped out of them. People told me to clear it out. Not cruelly. They said, "You'll feel better. Donate what you don't need. Don't let things hold you back." But I was not being held back. I was preserving a language. The tools were not clutter to me. They were vocabulary. They spoke Robert in a house that had gone too quiet. Kyle married Megan 2 years after Robert died. Megan was 31 then, bright, pretty, organized, and deeply convinced that anything not matching her taste had no reason to exist. She worked in real estate staging, which meant she could make a room look expensive for photographs, and had developed an almost religious contempt for objects with visible history. She called old furniture brown, not as a color, as an accusation. When she first saw my house, she said, "Nancy, this has so much potential." I knew then that meant she thought it looked wrong. Kyle laughed and said, "Mom likes it how it is." Megan smiled. "Of course, comfort is personal." It sounded polite. It was not. I tried with Megan. I did. I invited her for dinners. I remembered her birthday. I listened to her talk about listings, buyers, color palettes, and how most people had too much emotional attachment to items that don't serve the space. I ignored that last one because if I had answered, Thanksgiving would have ended early. She and Kyle had 2 children, Lily and Owen, 6 and 4 when this happened. I adored them. Lily had Robert's serious eyes. Owen had his habit of taking things apart to see what made them work. When they visited, they loved the garage. I let them sit on Robert's stool and sort washers by size. Owen called the red toolbox Grandpa's treasure box, though he had been too little to remember Robert clearly. That hurt beautifully. 6 weeks before the tools disappeared, Kyle called. "Mom, can we store some stuff in your garage?" I was making soup. "What kind of stuff?" "Just boxes. Basement renovation is starting Monday. Megan says the contractors need everything cleared." "How long?" 4 weeks, maybe 6. I hesitated. Should have listened to that hesitation. My garage is full. "Mom, it's huge. It has your father's things." "I know. We won't touch his stuff." That sentence mattered later. "We won't touch his stuff." I said yes. They arrived Saturday morning with a rented van and more items than promised. Boxes, plastic bins, chairs, a wrapped mirror, a treadmill that looked like it had been used as a laundry rack for 5 years. Megan walked into the garage and immediately made a face. "Nancy, you could fit so much more in here if you cleared some of this." I looked at the pegboard wall. "This is Robert's work area." She waved a hand. "I know, but he's not using it." The air changed. Kyle said quickly, "Megan." She looked confused. "What? I mean, physically." I said, "I know what you mean." She had the grace to blush slightly, but not enough to learn. They stacked their things along the right wall, near the freezer. I was very clear. Do not move anything from the workbench. Do not take anything from the pegboard. Do not open the red toolbox. If you need more space, call me. Kyle nodded. "Of course." Megan said, "Totally." I almost asked her to repeat it like a contract. I wish I had. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. Then I noticed little changes. A stack of Robert's scrap wood moved from one corner to another. The old shop radio unplugged. A jar of screws tipped over and not cleaned up. Megan said the contractors had borrowed a ladder and returned it. I said no one should borrow anything from my garage. Kyle said, "Mom, it's just a ladder." It is always just something when it belongs to someone else. Just a ladder, just space, just tools, just junk. The week before the sale, Megan asked if I had ever considered an estate cleanout. We were sitting at my kitchen table while the kids colored on printer paper. Kyle was in the backyard fixing the bubble machine because even though he had not inherited his father's discipline, he had inherited enough of his hands to be useful when pressured by toddlers. Megan sipped coffee and looked toward the garage door. "Nancy, I have a contact who helps families declutter after loss." I looked at her. "Do I seem cluttered?" No, not like that, just grief clutter is a thing." "Grief clutter?" "Items you keep because you're emotionally stuck." I set down my mug. "Megan, those are Robert's tools." She softened her face. "I know, but maybe keeping all of them is keeping you from moving forward." "Forward to what?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I have a home, I have routines, I have grandchildren. I volunteer at the food pantry, I go to church, I visit friends. I am not lying under the workbench clutching a wrench." Her mouth tightened. "I was just trying to help." "No," I said. "You are trying to make my grief match your square footage." She did not speak much after that. The sale happened while I was at a medical appointment. That detail came out later. I had gone for my annual mammogram on a Wednesday morning. Megan knew because I had asked Kyle if he could check on the kids after school if my appointment ran long. While I was gone, she came to my house, opened the side garage door using the code Kyle had, and let 2 buyers pick through Robert's tools. Not one buyer. 2. The first bought the drill press, clamps, and several hand tools. The second, Thomas Riley, bought the red toolbox, socket set, screwdrivers, carving tools, and several old measuring tools as a lot. Megan listed the items online under the title, "Garage Cleanout, Old Tools Must Go Today." Price, $650 for large lot. $650. The socket set alone was worth more than that. The value was not the point. But disrespect is sometimes easier to measure when you know how cheaply someone sold your pain. Thomas told me later that he thought something felt off when he arrived. Megan seemed rushed. She told him the tools belonged to her late father-in-law and that, quote, the family just wanted them gone. He asked if she was sure because some pieces looked well cared for. She laughed and said, "Trust me, nobody wants to deal with this old stuff." He paid cash because she requested cash. She wrote a receipt on a notepad from my kitchen drawer. Received from Thomas Riley, $400 cash, tool lot. Signed, Megan Whitaker. She had the confidence to sign her name. That helped later. Thomas loaded the toolbox into his truck. At home, while sorting through it, he found the cardboard note taped inside the lid. "Tools don't make a man useful. Care does." Then he found Robert's name scratched into the lid. R. Whitaker. Inside a small compartment, he found an old address label from a package I had mailed to Robert years earlier. Robert Whitaker, 114 Maple Ridge Lane, Kenosha, Wisconsin. Thomas said that was when his stomach dropped. He searched the address, found Robert's obituary, then found me on Facebook because my profile picture was me with Lily and Owen on my porch. That was why he messaged. "Mrs. Whitaker, I think I may have bought something that wasn't supposed to be sold. I did not see the message until after the garage discovery because Facebook had put it in requests. Once I hung up on Megan, I opened the message and called Thomas immediately. His voice was nervous. "Mrs. Whitaker, I am so sorry. You didn't know. I should have asked more questions. You asked enough to notice." He paused. "I have the toolbox and everything I bought. I haven't touched much. I can bring it back." I sat down on the garage step because my knees suddenly felt weak. "Thank you." I also saved the listing. "Do you still have the receipt?" "Yes, and the messages. Please don't delete anything." "I won't." Then he said something that broke me. "My dad died 5 years ago. I have his fishing rods. If someone sold them out from under me, I'd want a stranger to call." I cried then, not loudly, just enough that Thomas went quiet and waited with the kindness of a man who understood objects sometimes carry the dead more faithfully than people do. He brought the tools back that afternoon. He refused to keep the money. I tried to repay him. He said, "Take the tools first. We'll figure the money later." When his truck pulled into my driveway at 2:30, I was standing in the garage with my neighbor, Mrs. Keller, who had come over because she saw me crying near the recycling bins and said, "Well, we're not doing this alone." Thomas opened the tailgate. There it was, the red toolbox, scratched, familiar, home. I placed both hands on it and felt something inside me fold and unfold at once. The note was still inside the lid. "Tools don't make a man useful. Care does." Mrs. Keller read it over my shoulder and said, "That man had sense." "Yes," I whispered. "He did." Thomas returned everything he had purchased. The socket set, the carving tools, screwdrivers, measuring tools, hammer, a small tin of drill bits. Not everything was there, though. The drill press and larger items had gone to another buyer. Megan had sold some things in separate listings before Thomas even arrived. But now I had proof. Screenshots, receipt, messages, seller profile, photos of the tools in my garage, time-stamped pickup conversation. I called Kyle again. This time, I put the phone on speaker with Mrs. Keller beside me. He answered quickly. "Mom, Megan is really upset." I looked at the red toolbox. "Kyle, a buyer returned your father's tools and sent me proof of the sale." Silence. Then, "What?" "Megan sold them online. I have the listing, receipt, and messages." His voice changed. "Mom, I didn't know." That sentence hurt more than if he had lied, because I believed him. And because not knowing was still a failure, I asked, "Did you tell her not to touch her father's things?" "Yes." "Did you give her the garage code?" "She needed it for storage." "Did you check what she was doing?" "No." "Then your not knowing cost me." He did not answer. In the background, Megan said, "Is she still being dramatic?" Mrs. Keller inhaled sharply. I said, "Kyle, put me on speaker." He hesitated. "Mom." "Speaker." A click. Then Megan's voice, defensive and sharp. "Nancy, I already told you. I was trying to help. That garage was packed with unsafe junk." I looked at Thomas's receipt on the workbench. "You sold Robert's red toolbox." It was old. It had his father's note inside. "I didn't open every little thing." "You sold his socket set." "It was just tools." "You sold his carving tools." Silence. For the first time, something landed. Megan knew about the carving tools because she had seen the little ornaments Robert made for Lily's first Christmas, I continued. "You sold property from my garage without my permission, signed a receipt, and kept the cash." Kyle said, "Megan, what cash?" Megan snapped, "It was going toward our renovation." There it was. Not decluttering, not safety, money, space, convenience. I closed my eyes. "Thank you for finally telling the truth." She said, "Oh, don't act like you're some victim. You hoard dead people's stuff and make everyone tiptoe around it." Mrs. Keller muttered, "Lord, give me strength." I said, "You have until tomorrow at noon to return every item, every buyer contact, and every dollar. After that, I file a police report and a civil claim." Kyle said, "Mom, please." "No," I said, "you don't get to please me out of this." I hung up. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever had someone violate your home and then accuse you of being dramatic for caring, you know exactly what that garage felt like. It was not about tools as objects. It was about memory, permission, and the arrogance of someone deciding your grief was clutter. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment and tell me what item you would never let someone call junk. And if you have not already, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. The quiet part is over. Kyle came over alone that evening. He looked awful. Not tired, ashamed. He stood in the garage doorway, the way he used to stand there as a teenager, after denting Robert's car. "Mom," he said. I was sitting on Robert's stool, sorting the returned tools. "Don't say you're sorry unless you know what for." He swallowed. "I'm sorry I gave her the code." I waited. "I'm sorry I didn't protect Dad's things." I waited. "I'm sorry I let Megan talk about your grief like it was a problem to solve." That one mattered. He looked at the pegboard wall. "I should have known better." "Yes." His eyes filled. "I did know better. That's worse." "Yes." It was. He stepped toward the red toolbox and stopped himself before touching it. That also mattered. "Did you get everything back?" he asked. "No." "What's missing?" I handed him a list. Drill press, large clamp set, circular saw, 2 planes, 3 carved ornaments not yet finished, a box of specialty bits, several measuring tools, Robert's old work gloves, a toolbox drawer containing handwritten notes and small parts. Kyle looked sick. "I'll get them." "You'll try." "I'll get them." "No, Kyle, you will try, because your wife sold them to strangers." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "Megan did not come. She sent a text. I'm sorry you're upset, but I genuinely thought cleaning out the garage would help everyone. I can send you the money from the sale if that's what this is really about." If that's what this is really about. I forwarded the message to Kyle and replied, "This is about theft, trespass, and sale of property that did not belong to you. Send all buyer names, listings, messages, and payment records by noon tomorrow." She did not answer. At 11:48 the next morning, Kyle emailed me screenshots from Megan's seller account. Not all willingly, I suspect. But he sent them. There had been 5 listings. Garage clean out. Old tools. Must go today. Vintage drill press. Works. Heavy. Woodworking hand tools lot. Old workbench items. Tool chest, plus socket set. Total collected, $1, $740. $1,740. That was the price Megan put on 40 years of Robert's hands. The drill press buyer was a man named Eric Dunham in Racine. The clamp set and saw went to someone named Mike L. The woodworking planes had been shipped to a buyer in Madison. The work gloves were apparently included free in one lot. Included free. I printed every screenshot. Then I called the police non-emergency line. I did not do it because Kyle failed to try. I did it because Megan had already shown me she would minimize, delay, blame, and reframe until evidence forced her still. Officer Renee Caldwell came to my house at 2:15. She stood in the garage, looked at the empty pegboard shadows, the return toolbox, the screenshots, the receipt, and the messages. "Did you give Megan Whitaker permission to sell anything from this garage?" she asked. "No." "Did she have permission to enter?" "Only to access their stored items, not to remove my property." "Do you have documentation that the tools belong to your late husband or to you?" I almost laughed. Then I opened the filing cabinet. Robert had kept receipts for major tools. Warranty cards. Insurance photos from when we updated our homeowner's policy years earlier. Photos of him using the tools. The obituary that mentioned his work as a maintenance mechanic. Appraisal note from his union friend. And now Thomas's receipt and messages. Officer Caldwell raised her eyebrows. "You're organized." My husband was. "And you?" I learned. She nodded. The police report was filed. Because the property value, proof of sale, and unauthorized access were documented, it was not dismissed as a simple family misunderstanding. That phrase came up anyway. It always does when theft happens between people who share holiday photos. Officer Caldwell said, Sometimes families try to handle this privately. I looked at the red toolbox. I tried asking first. Understood. Kyle was devastated when he found out. Megan was furious. She called me 17 times. I did not answer. She left one voicemail. Nancy, you are insane. You are seriously calling police over old tools? Do you know what this could do to me? To Kyle? To the kids? You're choosing dead stuff over living family. I saved it. Then I sent it to Officer Caldwell. Dead stuff. That phrase became the center of everything. The first public confrontation happened at my house because Kyle insisted Megan needed to apologize in person. I said no twice. Then I agreed only if Mrs. Keller attended, and the conversation happened in the garage with my phone recording openly. Kyle arrived with Megan on a Wednesday evening. Megan wore white jeans, a beige sweater, and the tight expression of someone planning to endure unreasonable people. Kyle looked like he had not slept in days. Lily and Owen were not with them. Good. Some conversations should not use children as emotional shields. Megan stepped into the garage and looked around like she smelled something unpleasant. I stood beside the workbench. Mrs. Keller sat on a folding chair near the freezer, knitting something red and looking delighted to be useful. I placed my phone on the workbench. I'm recording. Megan rolled her eyes. Of course you are. Kyle said, Megan. I looked at her. Go ahead. She crossed her arms. I'm sorry. Silence. Mrs. Keller's needles clicked once. I said, For what? Megan's jaw tightened. For selling the tools. Whose tools? Robert's tools. And who owned them after Robert died? She looked away. You. And did you have permission? No. Did you keep the money? Her face flushed. Yes. Did you call them junk? She looked at Kyle. He looked down. Yes, she said. And dead stuff? Her eyes flashed. I was upset. So was I when I found my husband's life missing from the wall. That sentence finally quieted her. For 3 seconds. Then she said, I said I'm sorry. What else do you want? I picked up a printed list and handed it to her. Full restitution for unrecovered items. Return of recovered items. Buyer cooperation. Written statement acknowledging unauthorized sale. Replacement value for specialty tools that cannot be recovered. Apology to Kyle for selling his father's belongings. Apology to Lily and Owen someday when they are old enough to know why Grandpa's tools disappeared. She laughed. You are not serious. Kyle said, She is. Megan turned to him. You're taking her side? He looked at the pegboard wall. No, he said quietly. I'm taking Dad's. That one sentence changed the garage. Megan's face went pale. Because she had not expected Kyle to choose memory over marriage comfort, he continued. I told you not to touch his things. You said the garage was cluttered too. I said Mom needed help organizing someday. I did not say sell Dad's toolbox for cash. Megan's eyes filled. Oh, so now I'm a monster. Mrs. Keller looked up. Not now, dear. I nearly smiled. Megan glared at her. Kyle said, I found the messages. You told buyers the family wanted everything gone. Megan said nothing. He continued, You told them Mom agreed. That was new. I looked at her. Did you? Her mouth pressed into a line. Kyle answered for her. Yes. Officer Caldwell later confirmed, one buyer had said Megan claimed she was helping her mother-in-law clear things after a death. Helping. The word had been dragged into another crime scene. Megan's apology collapsed after that. She cried. She said she felt judged. She said I never liked her. She said Kyle made her feel alone. She said the renovation was stressful. She said the garage made her anxious. She said she thought I would thank her eventually. That last one made Mrs. Keller stop knitting. I said, Leave. Kyle looked at me. Mom, she can leave. You can stay. Megan wiped her face. Unbelievable. I said, No. What's unbelievable is that you sold a dead man's tools from his widow's garage and expected gratitude. She left. Kyle stayed. He sat on the garage step with his head in his hands while I sorted screwdrivers. After a long time, he said, Dad would be so disappointed in me. I did not soften it. Yes. He cried then. I let him. Not because I wanted him hurt, Because some grief has to reach the person who avoided it. The recovery took weeks. Thomas helped me contact other buyers. So did Kyle. Eric Dunham returned the drill press after hearing the story. He would not take extra money. He said, "My wife would kill me if I kept it." I liked his wife without meeting her. Mike L. returned the clamps and saw, though he wanted reimbursement. I paid him. Kyle reimbursed me. The woodworking planes shipped to Madison were harder. The buyer had already cleaned and resold one. We recovered 2 of 3. The missing one became part of the restitution claim. The work gloves never returned. That hurt. They were worthless in money and impossible in meaning. Robert's gloves had been shaped by his hands. You cannot replace that with an Amazon link. The unfinished carved ornaments also never returned. Megan claimed she did not remember seeing them. The listing photo showed a small wooden box in the corner. The buyer said the box was empty when he got it. Maybe someone threw them away. Maybe Megan did. Maybe they fell out. I will never know. I grieved those ornaments strangely hard. One was a half-carved robin, one a little house, one a star. Robert had been making them the winter before the diagnosis. He never finished. Now no one would. The legal process did not become a dramatic courtroom trial. It became what most family property theft becomes, when evidence is clear and relationships are tangled. Reports, statements, restitution negotiations, and consequences that felt both too much and not enough. Megan faced legal trouble, yes. The exact resolution involved restitution, community service, and a record that her real estate staging clients would not appreciate if they searched carefully. Kyle insisted on paying part of the restitution from their household funds because, as he said, my garage code made this possible. Megan hated that. Their marriage entered a cold season. I did not ask whether they would divorce. That was their house to inspect. The public family reveal happened at Owen's 5th birthday party 2 months later. I did not want drama at a child's birthday. I went because Owen had asked me on the phone if I would bring Grandpa's screwdriver story, by which he meant the little wooden screwdriver Robert had carved for Kyle as a child, not knowing his mother had recently sold half the garage. I brought books instead. The party was at a park pavilion. Blue balloons, grocery store cake, kids running between picnic tables. Kyle looked tense. Megan looked resentful and overbright, greeting everyone like nothing was wrong. Pauline, Megan's mother, approached me near the lemonade cooler. She was a tall woman with silver hair, expensive sunglasses, and the same talent as Megan for making disapproval sound like hygiene. "Nancy," she said, "I hope you and Megan can move past this little misunderstanding soon." There it was. Little misunderstanding. I looked at her. Which part was little? She blinked. The garage situation. You mean the unauthorized sale of my late husband's tools? Her lips tightened. Megan was trying to help clear space. She told me you had become very attached to old things. Did she tell you she kept the money? Pauline paused. That pause told me no. Did she tell you buyers were told the family wanted everything gone? No answer. Did she tell you a police report was filed with receipts, messages, and listing screenshots? Pauline removed her sunglasses slowly. What? Megan appeared then, almost as if summoned by exposure. Mom, don't. Pauline looked at her daughter. What police report? Megan's face flushed. Nancy escalated everything. I reached into my purse. Yes, I had copies. Not because I planned a scene at Owen's birthday. Because after betrayal, I had learned not to attend family gatherings without receipts when someone else controlled the story. I handed Pauline one page. The receipt from Thomas. Received from Thomas Riley. $400 cash, tool lot. Signed, Megan Whitaker. Then a screenshot of the listing. Garage clean out, old tools, must go today. Then the voicemail transcript. Dead stuff over living family. Pauline read silently. Megan whispered, Mom. Pauline's face changed, not fully toward me, but away from denial. She looked at Megan. You sold Robert's toolbox? Megan said, You don't understand. Pauline cut her off. No, I understand tools. That surprised me. Pauline looked at me. My father was a carpenter. For the first time I saw something like shame in her face. She handed the papers back. I was misinformed. Yes, I said. She nodded stiffly. I apologize for calling it a misunderstanding. That was enough for the moment. Megan looked like she might implode. Kyle had seen the exchange from across the pavilion. He came over, face tense. Everything okay? Pauline answered before I could. No, but at least now I know why. Then she walked away. That was the closest thing to public payoff that mattered. Not humiliation, correction. A false story had been stopped in the open air beside a birthday cake shaped like a dinosaur. Sometimes justice looks absurd. After the party, Kyle walked me to my car. I'm sorry she told people you were hoarding. I know. I should have corrected it sooner. Yes. He nodded. I'm going to. He did. Over the next weeks, Kyle called relatives, Megan's parents, and 2 neighbors she had spoken to. He told them plainly. Megan sold Dad's tools without permission. Mom had every right to report it. We are trying to make restitution. That cost him, I know it did. But it restored something. Not the tools. Not fully. Something between us. One Sunday afternoon in November, Kyle came over with Lily and Owen. Megan did not come. That was better. The kids ran into the house, hugged me, asked for cookies, and begged to see Grandpa's garage. My heart tightened. I had avoided letting them in since the theft because the empty spaces hurt. But children do not understand adult betrayal unless we teach them to fear rooms. I did not want that. So we went. The pegboard was not full like before, but many tools had returned. The red toolbox sat on the workbench. The drill press stood in the corner. The socket set was back in its drawer. I had placed small labels under some items, not for display, but memory. Robert's hammer. Walter's socket set. Kyle's first birdhouse clamps. Christmas carving tools. Owen climbed onto Robert's stool. Can I open the treasure box? I looked at Kyle, his eyes filled. Yes, he said, but gently. Owen opened the red toolbox. Lily stood beside him. I showed them the cardboard note. Tools don't make a man useful, care does. Lily read it slowly. What does that mean? Kyle sat on an overturned bucket. It means having tools doesn't matter if you don't use them to take care of people. I looked at my son. He looked back. That was the first time he had explained his father correctly in a long time. Owen asked, Did Grandpa take care of people? I smiled through the ache. All the time. Can we build something? Kyle looked at me again. I took a breath. Yes. We built a crooked little birdhouse. Not with Robert's best tools. With a small hammer, simple nails, pre-cut wood, and patience. Owen bent 2 nails. Lily painted the roof purple. Kyle held the boards steady. I found myself laughing when the back wall went on slightly slanted. Robert would have said, birds aren't inspectors. We hung it on the maple tree in the backyard. That evening, after the kids left, I sat in the garage and cried again. But this time it was not only grief. It was continuation. That is different. Megan eventually apologized in writing as part of restitution. It was more specific than I expected, likely because a lawyer helped. Nancy, I acknowledge that I sold tools and personal property belonging to Robert and to you without permission. I was wrong to call them junk and wrong to keep the money. I understand these items had personal and financial value. I am sorry for the harm I caused. It was correct. It was not warm. I accepted it the way I accepted the returned tools, as something recovered, not restored. Months later, she asked if she could come over to talk. I said no, not forever, just no. People think forgiveness requires immediate access. It does not. Sometimes forgiveness begins with refusing to let someone who harmed you stand in the room where they did it until you are ready. I was not ready. I may never be fully ready. Kyle and Megan remained married, though changed. They moved to a different house after the basement renovation ended, partly because Megan said she needed a fresh start, partly because Kyle said he could no longer live somewhere every corner reminded him of what they almost lost. He started therapy. Megan started some form of counseling too, though I know less about that because I stopped being the family emotional landfill. Kyle now asks before placing anything in my garage. Even a cooler. Especially a cooler. The garage has changed since the theft. I added a lock to the side door and changed the code. Only I have it. Kyle understands. If he feels hurt, he has never said so. That is wise. I inventoried every tool, photographed each wall, noted serial numbers where possible, and added the collection to my homeowner's policy. Not because money can replace memory, but because documentation is a way of telling the world, this mattered before you touched it. Thomas Riley became a friend, in the odd way grief introduces strangers who behave more like family than family did. Every December now, he drops off a small bag of homemade caramels his wife makes. I send them strawberry jam in June. He still refuses the full money back for the toolbox lot, so I donated it to a vocational program for high school students learning trades. Robert would have liked that. I also did something I had avoided for 3 years. I used the tools. At first, I thought touching them would feel like trespassing on Robert's memory. Then I realized leaving them untouched forever was another kind of loss. So I fixed the loose hinge on the pantry door. Badly at first. Then better. I tightened the handle on the back gate. I repaired the bird feeder. I sanded and painted a small shelf for Lily's room. The first time I picked up Robert's hammer, I cried before the nail went in. By the third nail, I was laughing at myself because I had hit my thumb. Care does, I said aloud. The garage is still Robert's in some ways. It is also mine now. That took time to understand. On the 4th anniversary of his death, I opened the red toolbox and placed a new note beside Walter's old one. Robert. I kept them safe as best I could. Then I learned to use them. Love. Nancy. Maybe that sounds sentimental, I do not care. Pretty things are not the same as precious things. Neither are practical things. Sometimes the most precious object in a home is a scratched red toolbox, filled with metal, memory, and the proof that love once fixed what it could. My son's wife sold my late husband's tools. The buyer sent me the receipt. And when Megan called them junk, when she said dead stuff over living family, when she tried to turn theft into decluttering, the truth came back in the bed of a stranger's truck with screenshots, cash records, and my husband's name scratched into the lid. She thought she was clearing space. She forgot some spaces are sacred because of who stood there before us. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know some of you have objects in your home that others might not understand. Tools, recipes, letters, clothes, furniture, photographs, old boxes. Things that look ordinary until love explains them. If Nancy's story reached you, I hope you remember that grief is not clutter, memory is not junk, and no one has the right to sell what they never cared enough to understand. Subscribe to Ultimate Revenge for more stories about quiet women, family betrayal, silent comebacks, and the receipts that finally bring the truth home. So tell me, if someone sold the last things your late husband touched and called them junk, would you handle it quietly for family peace? Or would you take the buyer's receipt straight to the police?